Welcome to the Stoic Storyteller, your sanctuary for raw, unfiltered stories about the darker side of human nature. Here, we dive deep into the reality of life, the toxic relationships, the bitter betrayals, and the quiet, calculating art of absolute justice.
Some husbands hide secrets, some hide money, some hide affairs, but Myra found something far worse inside her husband's safe, an invitation to her own funeral. Her name was printed in black and gold. The date was already chosen. The guests were already prepared. Only one thing was missing: her death. They thought she would be too afraid to fight back. They thought a perfect wife could be erased quietly. But they forgot one thing: a woman who finds her own grave before it is dug has time to prepare. This is the story of "I found my funeral invitation in my husband's safe." Let's begin. When Mara Voss found the black envelope, she was not looking for evidence. She was looking for a spare key. The house had gone quiet in that expensive, polished way rich houses often did, where silence did not feel peaceful but staged. Her husband's study sat behind double walnut doors at the end of the second-floor hall, a room Henry had always called private with the same tone other men used for sacred. Mara had lived in that house for 7 years, slept beside Henry for 5, hosted charity dinners under its crystal chandeliers, smiled beside him in newspaper photographs, and still the study remained the one place in the world where she was treated like a trespasser. That morning she entered anyway. The spare key to the garden shed was supposed to be in the top drawer of Henry's desk. She needed it because the landscaper had called in sick, the storm shutters were loose, and a line of black clouds was gathering over the lake. It was a simple reason, ordinary enough to be innocent. Mara repeated it to herself while she opened the drawer, because living with Henry had taught her that even innocence needed a prepared defense. The drawer was empty except for a silver letter opener, 3 fountain pens, and a photograph of Henry shaking hands with Judge Mallory at last winter's Veterans Gala. Myra checked the second drawer, then the third. The fourth was locked. She almost walked away. A year earlier, she would have walked away. A year earlier, she would have heard Henry's voice inside her head, calm and disappointed, asking why she insisted on creating problems. But something in Mara had changed since her mother died. Grief had not made her softer. It had scraped away a layer of obedience she had mistaken for love. She found the small brass key taped beneath the desk. The fourth drawer opened without a sound. Inside was a leather ledger, a pistol she had never seen before, and a narrow black envelope tied with a gray ribbon. On the envelope, in elegant white script, were the words, "For the memorial table." Mara's first thought was that someone had died. Her second thought was that Henry had not told her. She untied the ribbon. The card inside was thick, matte, expensive, the kind of card ordered by people who wanted grief to look dignified. She unfolded it slowly, and the room seemed to tilt. "In loving memory of Myra Elise Voss, beloved wife, devoted daughter, a soul taken too soon. Service to be held at St. Bartholomew's Chapel. Saturday, October 18th. Private reception to follow at Voss House." Myra read it once, twice. A third time, her own name stared back at her like a verdict that had already been signed. October 18th was 6 days away. Her hands did not shake. That frightened her more than panic would have. She placed the invitation on Henry's desk and stared at it under the pale morning light. There was no mistake. The paper carried the embossed crest of Everly and Sons, the funeral printers used by half the old families in the county. The chapel was real. The reception was real. The date was real. Only Myra was not dead yet. Downstairs, the grandfather clock chimed 11. Mara folded the invitation carefully and slipped it into the pocket of her cardigan. She returned the ledger and pistol exactly as she had found them. She locked the drawer, retaped the key, and left the study. In the hallway mirror, her reflection looked unchanged. Dark hair pinned low, pale face, gold wedding ring. A woman built into the architecture of a marriage that had slowly become a cage. Henry had been kind once, or else he had acted kind well enough to fool her. He brought flowers to her mother. He remembered birthdays. He laughed softly at her jokes in public and told reporters she was the moral center of his life. But after the wedding, kindness became a ration. He handed it out when she behaved and withdrew it when she asked the wrong questions. Why did the household staff change so often? Why was her inheritance moved into the Voss family trust? Why did her doctor, her therapist, her attorney, and her financial advisor all somehow know Henry before they knew her? Every question had made her look unstable. Every concern became proof of anxiety. Every objection became another entry in the invisible file Henry was building around her. Now she knew the file had an ending. At lunch, Henry came home wearing his navy suit and his practiced expression of concern. He kissed her forehead as if blessing a child. "You look tired," he said. "I slept badly. You should take the tablets, doctor. Ren prescribed. I don't like how they make me feel." Henry's smile tightened. Mara, refusing treatment is not strength. There it was, the velvet rope, the soft correction, the way he made disagreement sound like illness. She looked at him across the marble island and wondered how many times he had rehearsed being a widower. "What are you doing Saturday?" she asked. He paused for less than a second. Most people would have missed it. Myra did not. "Saturday, I have the hospital board breakfast." "Why?" "No reason." He reached for her hand. His thumb brushed her wedding ring. "You have to stop drifting like this. People are worried." "Which people?" "The people who love you." Myra almost laughed. 6 days, she thought. 6 days until the chapel. 6 days until the memorial table. 6 days until Henry Voss became the grieving husband of a woman he had already buried on paper. That night, while Henry slept, Myra sat in her closet with the funeral invitation on her knees. She did not cry. Crying belonged to women who still believed someone might come save them. Myra had no such illusion. She photographed the invitation with an old camera Henry did not know she kept. She hid the memory card inside the lining of a winter boot. Then she opened a notebook and wrote a single sentence at the top of the first blank page. "If I am going to die on Saturday, I should find out who has been invited." By sunrise, the storm had passed. The lake glittered under a clean sky. The house looked beautiful again, cruelly beautiful, as if nothing terrible could happen inside it. Mara made coffee. Henry kissed her cheek. The servants moved quietly through the rooms. And somewhere in town, a funeral printer had already prepared her name. Mara began with the only person in the house who still looked her in the eye. Elsie, the oldest housekeeper, had worked for the Voss family before Henry inherited the estate, before his father's stroke, before the portrait in the dining room was rehung to make Henry look taller beneath it. She was 73, small as a sparrow, with silver hair always twisted into a bun and hands that trembled only when she thought no one was watching. At 2 in the afternoon, Mara found her in the laundry room folding Henry's shirts with the precision of a nurse preparing bandages. "Elsie," Myra said, "do you know Everly & Sons?" The old woman's fingers stopped on a cuff. "Funeral printers," Elsie said. Myra watched her face. "Yes." Elsie resumed folding. "Old families use them." "Did anyone from this house contact them recently?" A shirt slipped from Elsie's hands. For a moment, neither woman moved. The washing machines hummed behind them. Rainwater dripped from the eaves outside the small window. The house seemed to lean closer. "Mrs. Voss," Elsie whispered, "some questions are dangerous." "That sounds like an answer." Elsie looked toward the door. "You should not ask me here." So Myra waited. At midnight, when Henry's bourbon and sleeping pill had done their usual work, Elsie came to Mara's sitting room carrying a tray with tea neither of them intended to drink. She closed the door, then set a small white envelope on the table. "I was told to burn this," she said. Inside was a receipt. Everly & Sons funeral stationery. Order, memorial invitations, guest register cards, chapel programs, reception cards. Name of deceased, Myra Elise Voss. Ordered by Henry Alden Voss. Delivery complete. Payment, Voss Charitable Foundation. Mara felt the world narrow to the size of the paper in her hand. "Why did you keep it?" Elsie sat down slowly. "Because your mother was kind to me." Mara's throat closed. "My mother. She visited once when you were away, 2 years ago. Mr. Voss had told the staff she was confused and not to let her wander, but she was clear, very clear." Elsie pressed her lips together. "She said if anything happened to you, I should remember that paper leaves trails." "My mother knew." "She suspected." "She asked about your medicines, your locked rooms, the visitors Henry brought when you were sleeping." Elsie's eyes grew wet. "A week later, she was dead." Mara looked down at the receipt until the ink blurred. Her mother, Evelyn Vale, had died of heart failure after a sudden fall. That was the story. A tragic accident in her own home. Henry had handled the hospital, the funeral, the paperwork. He had stood beside Mara in the cemetery, one hand firm on her back, whispering that grief could distort memory. Now Mara heard the sentence differently. Not comfort, warning. "Do you think Henry killed her?" Mara asked. Elsie did not answer. That was answer enough. Mara placed the receipt beside the invitation. 2 pieces of paper, 2 stones dropped into a dark well. "What else do you know?" Elsie shook her head. "Only pieces. Dr. Wren comes on Thursdays even when you have no appointment. Mr. Voss meets him in the study. Judge Mallory visits after midnight sometimes. Your attorney, Mr. Klein, sent boxes here when the trust was amended. I saw your signature on papers you never signed in front of me." Mara's blood went cold. "What papers?" I don't know, I only saw the cover page. Medical guardianship, estate transfer, emergency conservatorship. The words landed like nails. Emergency conservatorship meant Henry could claim she was incompetent. Medical guardianship meant he could control where she went, what she took, who saw her. Estate transfer meant money. Always money. Under all the tenderness and concern, there was money. Myra had inherited $42 million from her father and another 12 after her mother died. Henry's family name was old, but his fortune was not. Voss house was mortgaged. The foundation bled funds. Henry smiled like a prince because ruin in families like his wore tailored suits. "Why Saturday?" Myra asked. Elsie's face changed. "What?" "I heard Mr. Voss on the phone. He said Saturday would be clean because everyone important would already be there." Everyone important? The donors, the board, Judge Mallory, Dr. Wren, Mr. Klein, some officer from the sheriff's department. Elsie swallowed. "He said grief makes signatures easier." Myra stood and walked to the window. Outside, the lake reflected the moon like a blade. Her funeral was not just a murder. It was a meeting. Henry did not only want her dead. He wanted her death to finalize something. She turned back to Elsie. "Do you know where he keeps the trust documents?" "In the wall safe." "I found the drawer safe." Elsie shook her head. "No, ma'am, the other one, behind the painting of his father." Myra smiled for the first time that day. It did not feel like happiness. It felt like something colder learning to breathe. "Do you know the code?" Elsie looked down at her hands. "Mrs. Voss, if I tell you I cannot stay." "If you tell me," Myra said, "you may not have to run alone." The old woman raised her eyes. "His mother's death date," Elsie whispered. 06/14/1989. Myra wrote it down. Then Elsie reached into her apron pocket and withdrew a smaller item. A key, not brass, not decorative, steel, industrial. "This opens the old wine cellar," she said. "He had the lock changed last month, told everyone not to go down there because of mold." Myra took the key. "Is there mold?" Elsie's voice dropped so low Myra almost missed it. "No," she said, "there are cameras." Myra felt the house shift around her. Every hallway, every locked door, every polite lie suddenly connected into one monstrous shape. "Thank you," Myra said. Elsie stood. "Do not thank me yet, there is one more thing." Myra waited. "Your mother left you a letter. Mr. Voss took it before you saw it. I think he keeps it in the wall safe." The air left Myra's lungs. For 5 years, she had been told her mother left no final message. For 5 years, she had carried that absence like a second grave. Henry had stolen even that. Myra closed her notebook and placed the key in her pocket beside her funeral invitation. By morning, she knew 2 things with perfect clarity. Her husband was planning a death, and her mother had tried to warn her from beyond one. The wall safe opened on the second try. Myra waited until Henry left for his appointment with the governor's campaign committee. He kissed her before leaving, told her to rest, and reminded her not to drive while she was adjusting to the new dosage. Myra smiled, accepted the kiss, and watched his car disappear down the long gravel road. Then she went to the study. Henry's father stared from the oil portrait with a dead man's arrogance. Alden Voss had built nothing, inherited everything, and trained his son to confuse ownership with worth. Myra slid the portrait aside and found the steel panel behind it. 6,141,989. The keypad beeped softly, the lock released. Inside were passports, bundles of cash, a velvet pouch of jewelry, 3 hard drives, and a stack of legal folders bound by red string. Myra pulled the folders out one by one. The first held her financial records. The second held psychiatric notes written by Dr. Simon Wren. Myra read the opening page and felt sick. Patient demonstrates paranoid ideation toward spouse. Fixates on imagined confinement. Shows resistance to medication. Potential danger to self. She had never said half the things written there. The sessions she remembered as tense but ordinary had been rewritten into proof of madness. Her grief over her mother had become emotional instability. Her discomfort with Henry's control had become delusional suspicion. Her refusal to take sedatives had become non-compliance. The third folder was worse. Emergency petition for conservatorship. Applicant Henry Alden Voss. Subject Myra Elise Voss. Grounds psychiatric deterioration. Self-harm risk, financial vulnerability. Attached was a draft order with Judge Mallory's initials in blue ink. Myra laid the pages on the desk and photographed each one. The fourth folder contained the trust documents. Her signature appeared again and again, neat and confident. A good forgery, too good. Someone had practiced. The amended trust placed Henry as sole controlling trustee in the event of her death or incapacity, A clause directed substantial donations to the Voss Charitable Foundation. Another assigned Voss House to Henry free of all liens upon Mara's passing. Then she found the letter. It was sealed inside a plastic sleeve, addressed in her mother's handwriting. My Mara. For a long moment Mara could not touch it. She had prepared herself for evidence, not love. Love was more dangerous. Love could split her open. She broke the seal carefully. My darling girl, if this reaches you, it means I failed to protect you while I was alive. Henry is not the man he pretends to be. Your father discovered the Voss Foundation was being used to launder money through medical charities and court-appointed guardianships. He planned to expose it. The night before he died, he told me Henry was involved. Your father did not fall asleep at the wheel. I believe he was murdered. Myra stopped breathing. Her father had died in a car accident 10 years earlier. Wet road, late night. No witnesses. Henry had entered her life 2 years after that, charming, patient, sympathetic to a woman who had already lost too much. She forced herself to continue. I have hidden copies of your father's files where Henry will not look because he thinks grief makes women useless. It does not. The first key is in the thing you refuse to sell. Myra read the last line twice. The thing you refuse to sell. Her childhood piano. The piano sat in the music room downstairs, an old Steinway Henry hated because it did not match the imported furniture. He had tried to donate it 3 times. Mara had refused every time. It was the last object in the house that had belonged to her before Henry. The letter ended with a warning. Do not confront him. Do not trust Wren, Mallory, Klein, or Deputy Harrow. If you have found this too late, make them believe they are winning. Men like Henry never look behind them when they are marching toward applause. Mara folded the letter and pressed it to her chest. For the first time since she found the funeral invitation, rage rose in her not as flame but as architecture. It did not burn. It built rooms, it built doors, it built traps. She returned everything except the letter, which she tucked beneath her blouse. As she slid the portrait back into place, she heard the front door open downstairs. Henry was home early. Mara froze. His footsteps crossed the foyer, slow, measured. He was speaking to someone on the phone. She's compliant today, he said. No, I'll increase it tonight. By Saturday, she won't be able to stand without help. Mara moved silently behind the desk, then into the narrow service passage Elsie had shown her once. The house had old bones. Servants' corridors ran behind the formal rooms like hidden veins. Henry entered the study. Mara could see him through a crack in the paneling. He stood before the portrait, head tilted. Of course I checked, he said into the phone. She doesn't know. He opened the drawer safe, touched the black envelope and smiled. Mara's hand closed around her mother's letter. Henry laughed softly. By Sunday, everyone will be crying over the right corpse. The right corpse. Mara waited until he left. Then she returned to the music room, knelt beside the piano, and ran her fingers under the keyboard casing. Behind a loose strip of wood, she found a small brass key taped in place. Her mother had hidden the first door. Mara would find the rest. And this time, Henry would not be the only one preparing for Saturday. The old piano key opened a safety deposit box at First County Bank. Mara knew because the key carried a tiny engraved number on its stem, and because Evelyn Vale had been meticulous. Her mother would not leave a clue without a path. Mara used Henry's forced prescription as cover, telling him she felt foggy and wanted to sleep through the afternoon. He looked pleased by that. Men like Henry loved a woman horizontal, quiet, and easy to explain. The moment his car left, Mara changed into black trousers, tied her hair beneath a scarf, and walked through the old service gate at the rear of the property. Elsie's nephew, Tomas, waited at the end of the lane in a dented blue truck that smelled of pine needles and engine oil. My aunt says you need a ride and no questions, he said. Your aunt is wise. She also said if I asked questions, she would haunt me before she died. Mara almost smiled. At the bank, she used her maiden name. The clerk, a young woman with tired eyes, led her into a private room and returned with a long metal box. Inside were 3 folders, a flash drive, a photograph, and a cassette tape. The photograph showed Henry, Dr. Wren, Judge Mallory, Attorney Klein, and Deputy Harrow standing outside an abandoned psychiatric facility called Briarfield. Mara recognized it from childhood rumors, a place where wealthy families once sent inconvenient relatives. It had closed after a patient died in a locked hydrotherapy room. On the back of the photograph, her mother had written, "They reopened the cages under a cleaner name." The first folder contained bank transfers. Donations entered the Voss Charitable Foundation from medical suppliers, guardianship firms, and shell companies. Payments left to judges' clerks, doctors, attorneys, and law enforcement consultants. The second folder contained names of elderly widows and unstable heirs whose estates had been placed under emergency conservatorship. Many had died within a year. The third folder was labeled Vale Accident. Myra's father's accident report had been altered. The original toxicology was missing. A mechanic's statement about cut-break lines had been withdrawn. The responding deputy was Harrow. The county judge who sealed the file was Mallory. The attorney who handled probate was Klein. The physician who certified Myra's mother's later fall as accidental was Wren. Henry's circle had not begun with Myra. It had consumed her family piece by piece. Myra inserted the flash drive into the bank room's old computer. A folder opened. Inside were scanned documents and one video file. She clicked it. Her father appeared on screen, older than she remembered from the last photographs, but still broad-shouldered, still direct-eyed. He sat in his office at Vale Freight, speaking quietly. "If I am dead, Evelyn, this is what I found," he said. Myra covered her mouth. He named the shell companies. He named the estates. He named Henry Voss as a recruiter who targeted wealthy, grieving women, especially those with no siblings, no children, or unstable family ties. Henry seduced them, married them, isolated them, then used corrupt doctors and courts to gain control. "I don't know whether Myra is in danger," her father said. "She met Henry at the gala last month. He seemed too interested. Evelyn, keep him away from her." The video ended. Myra sat frozen. Henry had not met her by accident 2 years after her father died. He had seen her before, studied her, chosen her, waited until grief made the door easier to open. She copied everything onto 2 blank drives purchased at a pharmacy. One she hid in her bra. The other she sealed in an envelope and addressed to a journalist named Rowan Pierce, whose investigations had destroyed 2 judges and a private prison contractor. Her mother had written Rowan's contact information on the inside flap of the box. Outside the bank, Tomas leaned against the truck. "You look like someone just handed you a ghost," he said. "Several." On the way back, Myra asked him to stop at a shipping store. She mailed the envelope overnight, cash only, no return address. Then she bought a prepaid phone and called the number her mother had left. Rowan Pierce answered on the 4th ring. "This is Pierce. My mother was Evelyn Vale," Myra said. "She left me your name." Silence. Then Rowan's voice sharpened. "Where are you?" "Not safe." "Are you Henry Voss's wife?" Myra closed her eyes. "Yes." "You need to leave the house now." "I can't." "You can and you must." "No," Myra said. "If I run, he claims I'm unstable. He triggers the conservatorship. He locks my money, discredits the evidence, and sends someone after me. Saturday is when they all gather. That is when I can catch them together." Rowan did not speak for several seconds. "Your mother said you were stubborn," he finally said. "She said grief does not make women useless." Rowan exhaled. She was right. They agreed on a protocol. Myra would send photographs from the hidden camera. Rowan would verify the documents. If Myra failed to call by noon Saturday, he would publish everything. "Do not be heroic," Rowan said. "I'm not planning to be heroic." "What are you planning?" Myra looked toward Voss' house rising over the trees, all white stone and perfect windows. "I'm planning to attend my funeral." When she returned, Henry was waiting in the foyer. His smile was gone. "Where were you?" he asked. Myra let her shoulders slump. She made her voice small, tired, apologetic. "I walked by the lake. I needed air. You know you are not supposed to go out alone." "I'm sorry." He studied her for a long moment, looking for rebellion and finding only the mask she offered him. At last, he stepped close and brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. "I worry because I love you," he said. Myra leaned into his hand. "I know." That night, Henry stirred powder into her tea. Myra watched him do it in the reflection of the window. She drank nothing. Later, she poured the tea into a sealed jar and labeled it. Sample 1. Evidence was no longer something she found. It was something she began to collect. Dr. Simon Wren arrived every Thursday carrying a medical bag, and the soft cruelty of a man who had learned to wound with vocabulary. He was handsome in the sterile way of expensive clinics, with silver glasses, perfect hands, and a voice designed to make doubt sound childish. Henry adored him. Or perhaps Henry simply trusted men whose professions gave them legal access to other people's bodies. Myra received him in the sunroom. She wore a loose gray sweater, no makeup, and the faint tremor she had practiced for 15 minutes before the mirror. Wren opened his notebook. "How are we feeling today?" Myra asked softly. He smiled as if forgiving her. "How are you feeling?" "Tired." "Any disturbing thoughts?" Myra looked at Henry, who sat beside her with one hand resting possessively on the arm of her chair. Sometimes I feel watched. Henry sighed. Wren wrote something down. Watched by whom? Wren asked. Mara lowered her eyes. I don't know, maybe no one. Have you been entering rooms where you do not normally go? There it was. Henry had noticed something. Mara's pulse remained steady, only because rage had become discipline. I don't remember, she said. Wren exchanged a glance with Henry. That glance told her more than an hour of conversation could. They were pleased. Memory gaps helped them. Confusion helped them. A woman who doubted herself saved them paperwork. I would like to adjust your medication, Wren said. A slightly stronger sedative at night, and an anxiolytic in the morning. I don't want stronger medicine. Henry's hand tightened on the chair. Wren leaned forward. Mara, refusal is part of the illness. The frightened mind resists the very tools that can help it. What illness? He smiled. We have discussed this. No, she said, then let fear flutter across her face. I mean, I forget. Wren wrote again. Henry looked almost triumphant. The doctor removed a small bottle from his bag and placed it on the table. For tonight, Henry will help you keep track. I'm lucky to have him, Mara whispered. Henry kissed the side of her head. Mara imagined pressing the letter opener into his throat. Then she smiled. After Wren left, Henry walked him to the door. Mara stayed in the sunroom where she had positioned an old baby monitor behind a fern. The receiver lay hidden inside a knitting basket at her feet. Static hissed. Then Henry's voice came through. Will she be manageable by Saturday? If she takes the full dose, yes, Wren said. Disoriented, compliant, emotionally labile, enough for witnesses to confirm deterioration before the lake incident. Mara's fingers closed around a ball of yarn. Lake incident, Henry's voice lowered, and after, I certify accidental drowning with substance impairment. Mallory signs the emergency transfer retroactively if needed. Klein releases the documents. Harrow handles scene control. What about the staff? Your old housekeeper worries me. I'll dismiss her Friday morning. What? Mara stood so quickly the knitting basket tipped over. Elsie, Henry returned 10 minutes later and found her staring at the lake. You seem pale. I'm just tired. Then you should rest. He offered the pills. Myra took them with water, letting them rest under her tongue until he left. In the bathroom, she spat them into a tissue and sealed them in another evidence jar. Sample 2. That evening, Myra went to Elsie's room above the kitchen. She found the old woman packing a small suitcase. He is dismissing you tomorrow, Myra said. Elsie nodded. I heard. You need to leave tonight. I will not leave you here. You will because I need you outside this house. Elsie frowned. Mara handed her a sealed envelope containing copies of the receipt, the conservatorship draft, and her mother's letter. If anything happens to me before Saturday, take this to Rowan Pierce. Not the police, not the court, Pierce. Elsie touched the envelope like it was hot. You are going to let them go through with it. I am going to let them believe they can. There is a difference between courage and walking into a grave. I know, Mara said. That is why I'm bringing witnesses. The plan had begun to form in pieces. Henry needed an audience of powerful people to legitimize the aftermath. Mara needed the same audience to expose the before. The memorial reception would gather donors, board members, judges, police, doctors, attorneys, and grieving socialites who loved scandal only after it became safe to mention. Henry had created the perfect stage. He had simply forgotten that dead women did not usually speak. Mara spent the next day preparing her performance. She wrote emails from Henry's desktop while he showered, scheduling delivery for Saturday morning. She invited 3 additional names to the private reception: Rowan Pierce, a federal prosecutor her father once trusted, and a forensic accountant who had helped expose charity fraud. She used Henry's own stationery. Then she accessed the house security system. The wine cellar cameras Elsie mentioned were linked to a private server hidden in the basement. Mara could not break into it, but she did not need to. Tomas's cousin, a college student named Javi who fixed phones and trusted Elsie more than the law, came through the service entrance after midnight. Within 40 minutes, he had installed a second recording system that uploaded to a cloud account under the name of Myra's dead childhood cat. Rich people never change default passwords, Javi whispered. They change wives instead, Myra replied. He grinned, then sobered. You sure about this? Myra looked at the monitor showing the wine cellar. There were restraints on one wall, medical tubing, a metal table, a crate labeled Chapel Florals. Inside the crate was a folded black dress. Her black dress, the one Henry had chosen for her mother's funeral. Mara's skin turned to ice. Yes, she said, I'm sure. By Friday night, Elsie was gone. The evidence was duplicated, and Henry believed Mara had swallowed every pill. At dinner, he raised a glass of wine. To better days, he said. Mara lifted her glass and did not drink. To endings, she replied. "Eh." Saturday morning arrived dressed as a perfect day for morning. The lake was silver. The sky was blue. The air smelled of wet leaves and expensive flowers. At 7, florists entered through the service gate carrying white lilies, black ribbons, and arrangements shaped like restrained sorrow. At 8, caterers began arranging trays in the dining room for the reception that was supposed to follow Mara's death. At 9, Henry stood in the foyer giving instructions in a dark suit, speaking with the calm authority of a man who had mistaken logistics for fate. Mara watched from the landing. She wore a cream robe and let her hair hang loose, making herself look fragile, theatrical, doomed. Henry glanced up and softened his face for the staff. "Darling," he called, "you should be resting." "What?" "I wanted to see the flowers. They're for the foundation brunch." "Of course." One florist looked at Mara with faint confusion. Mara held his gaze just long enough for discomfort to bloom, then turned away. By 10, the first guests had arrived early. Judge Mallory came through the door smelling of cigars and old power. Attorney Klein followed, thin and polished, carrying a leather briefcase. Dr. Wren arrived with no bag this time, only a flat black case. Deputy Harrow entered through the side door instead of the front. 4 men, 4 pillars of Henry's little kingdom. Mara sat in her bedroom with the door cracked, listening through the baby monitor. In the study below, their voices gathered. "She's dosed," Mallory asked. "Enough," Henry said. "Enough is not a medical term," Wren replied. "She's slow, obedient. She thinks the reception is a donor event." Klein's voice was dry. "And the documents?" "In my safe." "Move them now," Klein said. "Once the death is reported, we cannot have anything sitting around that suggests preparation." Mara smiled. Too late. Every word was streaming to Rowan Pierce, to the federal prosecutor, to 3 cloud backups, and to a locked folder that would send itself to every major newsroom in the state if she failed to enter a password by midnight. Deputy Harrow spoke next. "The lake path is clear. I dismissed the patrol. Coroner's assistant owes me a favor." "And the body?" Mallory asked. "Silence." Mara leaned closer to the receiver. Henry answered, "She'll walk down with me after lunch. Wren gives her the final dose in the cellar if necessary. We stage confusion near the dock. She falls. I try to save her. Tragic. Witnesses will confirm she was unstable." "Not too many witnesses," Wren said. "Enough to make disbelief socially inconvenient," Henry replied. Myra wrote that sentence in her notebook. It was almost beautiful in its evil. At 11:30, Henry came upstairs carrying tea. "You need something warm," he said. Myra sat by the window. Her hidden camera, tucked inside a vase of dried lavender, caught his reflection as he stirred the cup. "I'm not thirsty. For me." His tone sharpened beneath the tenderness. Myra took the cup. Her hands trembled beautifully. She had learned from him that performance was power if one controlled the audience. "Henry," she whispered, "are you angry with me?" His face softened. He knelt before her. "Never. I'm trying to save you." "From what?" "From yourself." Myra looked into his eyes and saw no conflict there. That was the horror. Henry had rewritten murder into rescue so thoroughly that perhaps he believed the costume. She raised the cup to her lips and pretended to drink. At noon, Rowan Pierce entered Voss' house through the front door. Henry froze. Mara saw him from the top of the stairs. Rowan was younger than she expected, broad-faced, plain, carrying a notebook and wearing a suit that had not been chosen for elegance. Beside him stood Assistant U.S. Attorney Celia Brand and a forensic accountant named Noel Price, who smiled at no one. "Mr. Pierce," Henry said, recovering quickly, "I'm afraid this is a private event." Rowan lifted an invitation printed on Voss stationery. "Your office invited me." Henry's smile became a thin white line. Judge Mallory stepped from the study. "There must be some misunderstanding." "Then I'm sure you can clear it up," Celia Brand said. Myra came down the stairs slowly, one hand on the railing. The room turned toward her. Some guests saw a fragile wife. Henry saw a problem. "Darling," he said, "go back upstairs." Myra reached the bottom step. "No." It was the smallest word in the world. It landed like a gunshot. Henry recovered faster than the others. That was one of his gifts. Shock passed through him and vanished, leaving calculation behind. He crossed the foyer with open hands, the devoted husband returning to his role. "Mara," he said gently, "you're confused. This is not the time." She looked at Rowan, then at Celia Brand, then at the circle of guests pretending not to listen. "I found my funeral invitation," she said. "The foyer died." Someone laughed once, thinking it must be a dark joke. No one joined. Henry's eyes flashed. "She has been unwell." Myra reached into the pocket of her robe and removed the black invitation. She unfolded it and held it up. The white script gleamed under the chandelier. In loving memory of Myra Elise Voss. A woman near the stairs gasped. The florist who had seen Myra that morning crossed himself. Attorney Klein looked toward the study door. Celia Brand took one step forward. "May I see that?" Henry moved between them. "This is a private family matter." "No," Myra said. "It is a public crime." Judge Mallory's voice boomed. "Mrs. Voss, you are making accusations you cannot understand." Myra turned to him. "I understand that your initials are on a draft order declaring me incompetent." Mallory's face emptied. She turned to Wren. "I understand that you wrote psychiatric notes about conversations we never had." Wren adjusted his glasses. "Paranoid ideation often feels convincing to the patient." Myra smiled. "Good, then you won't mind explaining the recording." Before anyone could speak, the House speakers crackled. Javi had done his work well. Henry's voice filled the foyer. "By Saturday, she won't be able to stand without help." Dr. Wren's voice followed. Disoriented, compliant, emotionally labile. Enough for witnesses to confirm deterioration before the lake incident. The sound rolled through the house like smoke. Guests backed away from Henry as if illness had become contagious. Henry looked upwards, then at Myra. "You stupid woman," he whispered. Only those nearest heard it. Unfortunately for him, one of them was Rowan Pierce, whose recorder was already in his hand. Celia Brand said, "Mr. Voss, I advise you not to say anything else." Deputy Harrow reached for his phone. Noel Price spoke softly behind him. "Cell service is being monitored by federal warrant as of 20 minutes ago." What? Harrow froze. Henry laughed then, not loudly, not wildly. It was almost elegant. "You think this is enough?" he asked Myra. "A recording. A dramatic piece of paper. Do you have any idea how many hysterical women accuse their husbands when they are medicated and frightened?" Myra stepped closer. "I have the trust documents, the forged signatures, the foundation transfers, my father's accident file, my mother's letter, your calls, Wren's prescriptions, Klein's drafts, Mallory's order, Harrow's scene plan." With each item, a man in the foyer looked less human and more exposed. Henry's jaw tightened. "You have copies?" "Yes." "Where?" Myra leaned toward him. Everywhere grief could reach. For the first time, she saw fear in his face. It lasted 1 second. Then he grabbed her. His hand clamped around her wrist so hard pain shot up her arm. He pulled her toward the hallway, shouting about hysteria, about medication, about his wife needing help. People scattered. Celia called out. Rowan lunged. But Henry knew the house better than they did. He shoved Myra through the service door and dragged her into the hidden corridor behind the dining room. "Do you know what you've done?" he hissed. "Yes," Myra said through the pain. "I interrupted my funeral." He struck her. The blow snapped her head sideways. Stars burst behind her eyes. For 5 years he had never hit her where bruises could show. That restraint was gone now. The mask had fallen, and beneath it was not rage but entitlement enraged by inconvenience. He dragged her down the narrow stairs toward the basement. Myra stumbled deliberately, slowing him. Behind them, voices shouted. Doors slammed. But the service corridors branched in old, confusing paths. Henry shoved open the wine cellar door and threw her inside. The room smelled of stone, dust, and chemicals. The metal table waited under a hanging lamp. Henry locked the door. Myra pushed herself upright, tasting blood. Henry turned to her with the black case in his hand. "You should have taken the tea," he said. Myra wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. "You should have checked the cameras." The red recording, light above the wine rack, blinked like a patient eye. Henry followed Myra's gaze and understood too late. For the first time since she had known him, he looked genuinely uncertain. Not afraid, not yet. Henry believed every disaster had an exit if one knew the right person to call. But uncertainty cracked the marble of him, and Myra took a grim pleasure in seeing the fracture. "What did you do?" he demanded. "I learned from you," Myra said. "I prepared the room before inviting the guests." He crossed to the camera and ripped it from the wall. Wires sparked. The red light died. Myra smiled despite the blood on her lip. That was the visible one. Henry turned slowly. The wine cellar was old, full of shadows, pipes, gaps in stonework, and polished bottles that had outlived better men. Javi had hidden 3 cameras, one in the vent, one in the broken clock, one inside an empty wine bottle facing the metal table. Henry threw the black case at the wall. Glass shattered. "You think a prosecutor saves you?" he said. "Celia Brand wants headlines. Mallory knows senators. Klein knows every loophole. Wren knows every diagnosis. Harrow knows how bodies disappear. And you know how to talk," Myra said. "So talk." He stared at her. Tell the camera why my father died. Something changed in his face. For years, Mara had mistaken Henry's restraint for strength. Now she saw it as vanity. He wanted to be understood as brilliant, not merely caught as guilty. Your father was reckless, he said. He found a machine he could not comprehend and decided morality made him powerful. You cut his brakes. I authorized a solution. The words floated in the cellar, clean and monstrous. Myra forced herself not to react. And my mother's. Henry shrugged. Evelyn should have been smarter. She knew grief but not fear. Fear is the only emotion that keeps people alive. You pushed her. I visited. She became agitated. Stares are unforgiving. Myra felt something inside her go still forever. My parents were not obstacles, she said. They were people. They were assets and liabilities, Mara. Everyone is. Outside the door, fists pounded. Voices shouted her name. Henry ignored them. You could have had a good life, he continued. A beautiful house. Respect, protection. All you had to do was stop asking where the walls ended. And let you kill me. His expression softened in a grotesque imitation of pity. Your death would have been useful. That is not the same as personal. Mara laughed once, sharp and humorless. You planned my funeral and still think I should appreciate your professionalism. The pounding at the door grew louder. Henry looked toward it, then back at her. Calculation returned. He pulled a syringe from the black case. The recording will not matter if you attack me first. Mara stepped backward. He advanced. Then the wine cellar door exploded inward. Tomas came through first with a fire axe. Rowan followed. Deputy Harrow, apparently deciding the sinking ship still required violence, grabbed Tomas from behind. The two men crashed into the shelves. Bottles shattered across the floor. Celia Brand shouted for everyone to freeze. No one did. Henry lunged at Mara. She turned, slipped on spilled wine, and fell hard. The syringe passed over her shoulder and buried itself in Henry's own thigh. For one surreal second, everyone stopped. Henry looked down at the needle in his leg. Myra looked up at him. What was the dose? She asked. His face drained. Wren, standing in the doorway, whispered, too much. Henry staggered. Rowan caught his arm, not out of kindness, but to keep him upright for arrest. Celia seized the syringe with a gloved hand. Harrow was pinned to the floor by Tomas, who looked astonished at his own bravery. Myra sat among broken glass and wine, breathing hard. Henry's knees buckled. Wren moved toward him, but Celia snapped, do not touch him. But he needs a hospital, Celia said, and you need counsel. Henry's eyes found Mara as the sedative pulled him downward. You ruined everything, he slurred. Mara rose slowly. Her wrist throbbed. Her lip burned. Her heart felt carved out and filled with iron. No, she said. I arrived early. By the time federal agents entered the cellar, the hidden cameras had uploaded Henry's confession to 3 servers. Rowan's recorder had captured the aftermath. And half the guests upstairs had already begun revising their memories into versions where they had always suspected something. That was how powerful people survived scandals. They shed loyalty like snakeskin. Mara watched Henry carried out on a stretcher beneath his own morning flowers. In the foyer, the memorial portrait had not yet been placed on the table. The frame leaned against the wall, wrapped in black cloth. Mara pulled the cloth away. It was a photograph of her smiling beside Henry at the lake. She took it outside, walked to the dock, and dropped it into the water. The lake accepted the lie without a ripple. Arrest did not feel like justice. Mara had expected relief, perhaps even triumph, when Henry, Wren, Klein, Mallory, and Harrow were taken from Voss House in separate vehicles. Instead, she felt emptied. The body cannot hold terror for days and release it cleanly in one afternoon. Fear leaves residue. It clings to doorways. It whispers from teacups. It makes even rescue feel like another form of surveillance. By evening, Voss House was full of agents. They photographed the study, boxed the wall safe, sealed the wine cellar, and carried away computers wrapped in evidence tape. Guests were interviewed in the parlor beneath the portrait of Alden Voss, whose painted eyes seemed offended by accountability. Rowan Pierce moved through the rooms with quiet intensity, taking notes, asking questions, refusing every drink offered to him. Celia Brand found Mara in the music room. Mara sat at the Steinway, not playing. Her mother's letter lay on the bench beside her. We need your formal statement, Celia said gently. Not tonight if you can't. I can. You don't have to prove toughness to me. Mara looked at the piano keys. I'm not proving toughness, I'm preserving sequence. Celia nodded as if she understood. Perhaps she did. Prosecutors lived on sequence. Crime was chaos until someone placed events in order. So Mara spoke. She began with the black envelope and ended with Henry's confession in the cellar. She gave names, dates, passwords, hiding places. She described her father's video, her mother's letter, Dr. Wren's false notes, Klein's forged documents, Mallory's draft order, Harrow's Lake plan. Her voice remained steady until she reached the part where Henry admitted her mother had been pushed. Then silence took her. Celia closed the notebook. "We can stop." "No," Myra swallowed. "Write it down." Celia waited. He said stares are unforgiving. The prosecutor's face tightened, but her pen moved. At midnight, Rowan's article went live. The headline was not elegant. It was not restrained. It did not care about old money's preference for euphemism. The wife invited to her own funeral. Inside a county's CONSERVATORSHIP murder. By dawn, every local station had vans outside the gate. By noon, national outlets were calling. Henry's old photographs appeared beside phrases like alleged murder conspiracy, charity fraud, judicial corruption, and staged drowning plot. Commentators spoke in grave voices. Former acquaintances posted cautious statements about being shocked, saddened, praying for truth, standing with victims, and having barely known the Voss family despite decades of dinner invitations. Mara watched none of it. She slept for 14 hours in Elsie's spare bedroom over the bakery owned by Tomas's mother. The room was small, the wallpaper faded, the mattress lumpy. It was the safest place she had ever slept. When she woke, Elsie was sitting beside the bed with coffee. "You screamed once," Elsie said. "Only once. I counted it as progress." Myra accepted the cup. Outside the window, ordinary people bought bread. A child cried because he wanted a sugared roll. A cyclist cursed at a delivery truck. Life went on with insulting ease. Myra envied it. "Henry survived," Elsie said. "I know. They say he is asking for you." Myra sipped the coffee. It was too strong and perfect. "He can ask the walls." Elsie smiled faintly. 2 days later, Myra returned to Voss House with federal agents. The house looked smaller now. Not physically, but morally. Its grandeur depended on obedience. Without fear, the marble was just stone, the chandeliers just glass. In the study, Celia Brand showed her the contents of Henry's hard drives. There were files on 7 women. Myra was number 6. Each file contained photographs, financial records, medical vulnerabilities, family histories, grief triggers, preferred manipulation strategies. Henry had built courtships like acquisitions. One woman had died in a bathtub. One had been institutionalized. One had vanished abroad after signing over assets. 2 elderly widows had donated entire estates to the Voss Foundation before dying under hospice care arranged by Wren. The 7th file was labeled Candidate, Lena Ortiz. Lena was 29, recently inherited a technology fortune after her brother's overdose, and had attended a charity dinner with Henry 3 months earlier. Mara stared at the file until the name blurred. "He was replacing me before killing me," she said. Rowan, standing nearby, answered quietly. "Predator's pipeline victims." Mara closed the folder. "Find her." "We are." "No," Mara said. "I mean let me find her." Celia frowned. "Mara, she will not trust agents at first. She will not trust reporters. She will recognize the tone of a woman who almost became a ghost." 3 hours later, Mara sat across from Lena Ortiz in a hotel cafe under a fake name. Lena was beautiful, brittle, and already halfway inside Henry's web. He had sent flowers after their first meeting. He had recommended Dr. Wren for grief counseling. He had spoken of purpose, legacy, and loneliness with surgical precision. Mara placed the black funeral invitation on the table. Lena read it. Her face changed. "That's your name," she whispered. "Yes." "Why are you showing me this?" "Because the next one might have been yours." Lena covered her mouth. Mara reached across the table, not touching her, only offering the choice. "Come with me," she said. "Tell them everything now while you are still alive enough to be believed." Lena Ortiz testified before Henry even regained full speech. That was the first crack in the empire after the arrests. The second came from Dr. Wren's nurse, who brought 3 years of appointment logs and pharmacy records to federal investigators after seeing Rowan's article. The third came from a retired clerk in Judge Mallory's court who had kept copies of sealed conservatorship orders because, as she told Celia Brand, "I knew the devil had a filing system." By the end of the week, the Voss Foundation was no longer a charity. It was a crime scene with letterhead. Mara spent those days in rooms without decoration, answering questions under fluorescent lights. She identified forged signatures. She narrated security footage. She reviewed photographs of women she had never met, but now carried inside her like inherited grief. Each victim had been reduced to a file by men who believed paperwork could domesticate evil. At night, she read about them. Caroline Ames, 72, widow of a shipping magnate, declared incompetent after accusing her nephew and Dr. Wren of theft, died 6 months later of medication complications. Beatrice Lowell, 68, philanthropist, signed a foundation donation while under emergency guardianship, drowned in a bathtub. Nadia Say, 35, heiress, hospitalized after a reported psychotic break, assets transferred, discharged to a private facility, no public record after that. Myra stopped at Nadia's name. No public record did not mean dead. It meant erased. She brought the file to Rowan. Find her, she said. He looked exhausted. I'm trying. Try harder. That tone works better on husbands planning murder. Myra almost smiled. I'll practice. Rowan leaned back. There are rumors of a facility tied to Wren, not registered under his name. Private recovery center outside the county, Briarfield. Myra remembered the photograph from the deposit box. They reopened the cages under a cleaner name. Take me. No. Rowan. No, he repeated. You are a witness, a target, and currently the most recognizable almost murdered woman in America. I am also the only one who knows what it feels like to be handled by them. That is not a credential I want you using. But Mara had spent years being told no by men who expected obedience. Rowan's no was different. It contained concern, not control. That made her pause, but it did not stop her. 2 nights later, she and Elsie drove to Briarfield without telling him. The facility stood beyond a line of winter trees, a renovated stone complex with warm lights and a sign that read HAVNCRESD Restorative Care. The name was gentle enough to be obscene. A place did not need bars when every locked door had a medical explanation. Elsie parked under a dead oak. You are certain this is wise? She asked. No. Refreshing honesty. Mara wore a dark coat, a wig, and glasses. She carried a clipboard stolen from Confidence and a visitor badge Javi had printed after locating Havencrest's vendor format online. The front desk nurse barely looked up. I'm here for the medication audit, Mara said. On a Sunday. Wren moved it, you know how he is. The nurse rolled her eyes. That was the key. Corruption ran on hierarchy. Underpaid staff often hated the same men victims feared. Myra was waved through. Inside, Havencrest smelled of lavender, disinfectant, and captivity. The halls displayed watercolor landscapes. The doors had keypad locks. Patients moved slowly in robes, their faces softened by medication. Myra found Nadia Say in room 14. She was thinner than her file photograph, her hair cropped short, her wrists bruised from old restraints. She sat by the window staring at nothing. Nadia, Myra whispered. No response. My name is Myra Voss. Nadia's eyes moved. At the name Voss, fear returned before language did. She backed against the chair. No, she whispered. No more papers. I'm not here for papers. I'm here to take you out. Nadia shook her head. They said I signed. They said I wanted treatment. They said my brother agreed. Did he? My brother is dead. Myra knelt before her. Mine too, in a way, my father, my mother, they did this to them. Henry did this to me. Nadia stared at her. You were number 3, Myra said. I was number 6. Something in Nadia's face broke. Before Myra could say more, an alarm sounded in the hallway. Elsie appeared in the doorway, breathless. We have company. Behind her, 2 orderlies rounded the corner. Myra took Nadia's hand. Can you run? Nadia looked down at their joined hands, then at the locked door, then toward the hallway where footsteps were coming fast. I forgot, she whispered. Myra pulled her up. Then remember now. Nadia remembered enough. She did not run beautifully. She stumbled, swayed, and nearly collapsed twice before they reached the service corridor. Elsie, who moved with the ruthless efficiency of elderly women underestimated by everyone, shoved a laundry cart into the path of the first orderly and slammed a door against the second one's shoulder. This way, she snapped, as if escaping illegal captivity were simply another household task being done poorly by men. Mara guided Nadia through the kitchen, past shelves of labeled supplements and meal trays toward the loading dock. The alarm shrieked above them. Somewhere behind, a woman began laughing hysterically. Somewhere else, a man cried for his daughter. At the exit, Dr. Wren's nurse stood blocking the door. Mara froze. The nurse looked at Nadia, then at Mara, then at Elsie. Security is coming, she said. Mara tightened her grip on Nadia's hand. The nurse stepped aside. So move. Outside, cold air struck them like mercy. Elsie's car was already rolling when Mara pulled Nadia into the back seat. An orderly reached the loading dock and shouted. Elsie reversed hard enough to knock over a trash bin, then drove straight over the lawn, through a decorative hedge, and onto the county road. For 3 miles, no one spoke. Then Nadia began to sob. Not delicate tears, not cinematic grief. Her body convulsed with the sound of a person returning to herself too violently for comfort. Myra held her and Elsie drove faster. Rowan called as they reached the highway. "Where are you?" he demanded. Myra closed her eyes. "You are going to be angry. I passed angry when Celia told me Havencrest just reported a security breach involving a woman matching your description. I found Nadia." Silence. Then Rowan exhaled, long and furious. "Are you safe?" "For the next 10 minutes. Go to the federal building, now." Nadia testified the next morning. Her voice was weak, but the content was devastating. She described forged consent forms, isolation, forced medication, punishment rooms called calming suites, and Wren's visits with donors who toured Havencrest as if inspecting investments. She described Henry visiting once, touching her shoulder and saying, "The tragedy of difficult women is that peace has to be chosen for them." That phrase appeared in 3 other patient files. Celia Brand moved fast. Havencrest was raided before sunset. Patients were removed. Records were seized. The director tried to shred documents and was caught on camera doing it. By midnight, the case had expanded beyond Henry into a statewide guardianship racket involving judges, doctors, attorneys, private facilities, and charitable laundering. The news loved Myra again, but differently now. At first, she had been the almost dead wife, then the brave survivor. Now, after Havencrest, she became something less comfortable, a woman who kept opening doors people preferred closed. Public sympathy had limits. The public loved a victim when she bled quietly. It became nervous when she picked up a knife. Henry's lawyers noticed. 3 weeks after his arrest, they filed a motion claiming Mara had orchestrated the cellar confrontation, manipulated recordings, kidnapped Nadia Say, and suffered from untreated delusions. Dr. Wren, through counsel, suggested Mara had forged the funeral invitation herself to frame a loving husband during a psychiatric break. The lie was absurd. It was also familiar. At the preliminary hearing, Henry appeared pale but composed. He wore a charcoal suit and no wedding ring. Mara sat behind the prosecution table, hands folded, while photographers crowded the back of the courtroom. Henry did not look at her until the judge entered. When he finally did, he smiled. Not warmly, not triumphantly. Intimately, as if the courtroom were another room in their house, and everyone inside it staffed. The defense attorney rose and began the old song in a new key. Mara was unstable. Mara was wealthy. Mara was grieving. Mara had long resented her husband's attempts to secure treatment. Mara had a motive to fabricate abuse because she feared losing control of her fortune. Then the attorney displayed a photograph of Mara, leaving Havencrest with Nadia. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "this is not a victim, this is a vigilante." Mara heard murmurs behind her. Celia Brand stood. "The government will respond with evidence." But Henry's smile widened. Evidence mattered in court. Narrative mattered everywhere else. That night, Mara returned to Elsie's bakery room and found a package on the bed. No return address. Inside was a single printed photograph of her walking down the courthouse steps. A red circle had been drawn around her head. Beneath it was a note. "You survived your funeral. Do not mistake that for immortality." Elsie read it and reached for the phone. Mara stopped her. "No," she said. "What do you mean, no?" "I mean Henry didn't send this." "How can you know?" Mara stared at the note. "Because Henry would have wanted me to know it was him." For the first time, the conspiracy felt larger than the man she had married. Henry was not the king. He was a door. The threat note carried no fingerprints, no fibers, no useful trace. It had been printed on common paper with common ink and delivered by someone who knew the bakery's back entrance camera had a blind spot between 2:11 and 2:18 in the morning. That detail mattered. Amateurs threaten loudly. Professionals choose 7 minutes. Celia Brand assigned protection. Mara hated it immediately. 2 agents outside the door made her feel safer in theory and trapped in practice. She endured them because Nadia still flinched whenever footsteps stopped outside a room, and Lena Ortiz had begun receiving silent calls. Rowan believed the note came from someone above Henry. There was too much infrastructure, he said in the federal building cafeteria. Wren had facilities, Mallory had court access, Harrow had scene control, Klein had paperwork. Henry recruited and benefited, but someone taught them how to scale it. "Scale murder," Mara said. "Scale control. Is that supposed to sound better?" "No." Noel Price, the forensic accountant, joined them with a stack of printed charts. He had the pale, haunted look of a man who had spent too many nights staring at spreadsheets until they confessed. "I found the upstream fund," he said. Mara leaned forward. Most foundation money moved through shell charities, but percentages were skimmed into a donor-advised fund called the Ashbourne Trust. Private, old, politically connected, it predates Henry's involvement by 15 years. Rowan's eyes narrowed. Trustees, hidden behind nominee structures, but one name appears in archived filings. Noel placed a page on the table. Vivian Ashbourne. Mara recognized the name. Everyone did. Vivian Ashbourne was a widow with museums named after her, scholarships in her late husband's honor, and a face that appeared in society magazines beside phrases like civic duty and moral leadership. She had hosted governors, funded hospital wings, and once chaired a national commission on elder protection. Mara laughed, and the sound surprised even her. What? Rowan asked. She chaired elder protection. Noel looked grim. Predators love oversight boards. It tells them where the doors are. Vivian Ashbourne had invited Henry to his first major donor gala. Vivian had introduced Wren to hospital administrators. Vivian's late husband had owned Briarfield before it became Havencrest. Her name was not on the funeral invitation, but her fingerprints were on the architecture. Can you prove she knew? Mara asked. No, Noel said, not yet. Then she'll stay clean. Rowan nodded. Unless someone makes her speak. The opportunity arrived 2 days later in the form of an invitation. Vivian Ashbourne was hosting a private memorial luncheon for victims of institutional abuse, a performance so shameless it almost became art. The guest list included donors, reform advocates, journalists, and politicians eager to appear horrified by crimes they had ignored until cameras arrived. Mara received a personal note. My dear Mrs. Voss, what you endured is beyond words. I hope you will allow me to honor your courage and help guide this painful moment toward healing. With admiration, Vivian Ashbourne. Mara read it aloud to Rowan. No, he said. You didn't let me finish. You finished when you said Vivian Ashbourne. She wants to see how much I know. She wants to measure whether you can be managed. Then I should let her measure wrong. Rowan rubbed his face. You have a gift for making bad ideas sound strategically inevitable. Mara attended the luncheon wearing black. The Ashbourne estate made Voss House look young and insecure. Its lawns rolled toward the river. Its windows reflected the sky with aristocratic indifference. Inside, grief had been catered in tasteful portions. White roses, string quartet linen napkins, photographs of victims displayed without permission. Mara stopped before her own photograph. Vivian had chosen one from Henry's foundation gala. Mara looked elegant and vacant beside her husband. Unforgivable, isn't it? Vivian said behind her. Mara turned. Vivian Ashbourne was 81, tall, silver-haired, and terrifyingly beautiful, in the way some old women become when wealth has removed every soft consequence from their lives. Her eyes were blue and dry. You using my face? Mara asked. Men using your trust. Mara smiled. Both. Vivian inclined her head, conceding the point like a queen amused by a clever servant. I wanted to meet you privately, Vivian said. I assumed you wanted to know what I had. I know what you have. Documents, recordings, testimony, enough to ruin vulgar men. Vulgar men. Henry was always theatrical. Mara's pulse slowed. There it was, not denial, distance. Vivian touched a white rose. You must understand, Mrs. Voss, systems are built because families fail. Some people cannot manage wealth, grief, addiction, illness. The courts intervene. Doctors advise. Foundations preserve assets for meaningful use. You mean stealing. I mean stewardship. You mean murders. Vivian's expression did not change. I mean history is written by institutions, not widows with bruises. Mara leaned closer. I'm not a widow. No, Vivian said softly. That was Henry's failure. A waiter passed carrying champagne. Vivian took a glass. You survived one man, she continued. Do not declare war on a class of people who own the weather. Mara looked at the recorder hidden in her bracelet. Vivian smiled. And do not insult me with jewelry from a spy shop, she said. Mara's blood chilled. Vivian lifted her glass. To healing, she said, and walked away. Mara left the Ashbourne luncheon with nothing useful recorded and everything important confirmed. Vivian knew. Vivian was careful. Vivian understood performance better than Henry ever had. Henry wore masks to hide ugliness. Vivian wore virtue to make ugliness respectable. The bracelet recorder contained only polite condolences and the faint sound of string music. Vivian's threatening sentence had been spoken in the dead zone beside a fountain, where white noise swallowed words. The woman had not survived half a century of public influence by forgetting acoustics. Rowan listened to the file anyway. Nothing, he said. Not nothing, Mara replied. She knew about the recorder. That is not admissible. It is educational. Celia Brand was less patient. Do not meet Vivian Ashbourne again without notifying us. She invited me, and wolves invite lambs by looking hungry. Mara accepted the rebuke because it was deserved. The problem was proof. Every path to Vivian ended at layers of attorneys, trusts, private boards, and dead intermediaries. The Ashbourne Trust funded reform groups and care facilities. It also funded shell entities that paid Henry's circle. None of the transfers said murder for profit. Corruption rarely labeled itself. Then Nadia remembered the Blue Room. It happened during a recorded interview. She was describing Haven Crest when she stopped mid-sentence, eyes fixed on the table. There was a room, she whispered. Blue wallpaper, no windows. They took me there when donors visited. What donors? Celia asked. I don't know, I was medicated, but there was a woman's voice, older. She wore a perfume like smoke and roses. Mara looked at Rowan. Vivian. Nadia pressed her palms to her temples. She said I had a beautiful sadness. She said Henry chose well. She asked Wren how long before asset stabilization. Asset stabilization. Noel Price nearly dropped his pen. That phrase appears in the Ashbourne Trust memos, he said. Celia leaned forward. Nadia, did you ever sign anything in that room? They put a pen in my hand. Sometimes I couldn't see the paper. Nadia began to tremble. There was a camera in the ceiling. Wren said consent must be documented. The room went silent. A camera. If Haven Crest recorded coerced signatures, the footage might still exist. Facilities kept archives for protection, blackmail, or both. The raid had seized servers, but not everything. One storage room listed in the building plans had been empty when agents arrived. Too empty, Celia said. Fresh dust patterns, missing racks. Someone removed drives before the raid. Myra thought of the Threat Note's 7-minute blind spot. Professionals did not destroy leverage. They moved it. 3 days later, a package arrived for Rowan Pierce at his office. Inside was a cracked hard drive wrapped in newspaper and a note written in block letters. She kept COPIES of every cage. No signature. The drive was damaged but recoverable. Forensics worked through the night. By morning, they had partial video from Haven Crest's Blue Room. The first clip showed Nadia, sedated, guided by Wren to sign documents. Henry stood in the corner, arms crossed. Vivian Ashbourne's voice came from off-camera. Do not rush the hand. A signature must look like a decision. The second clip showed Caroline Ames crying while Attorney Klein explained she was protecting her grandchildren by transferring assets. Caroline had no grandchildren. The third showed Beatrice Lowell refusing medication. Deputy Harrow entered, spoke quietly, and Beatrice stopped refusing. The fourth clip showed Myra's mother. Myra did not realize she had stood until Rowan said her name. Evelyn Vale sat in the Blue Room, hands bound loosely in front of her, face bruised but unbroken. Wren stood beside her. Vivian Ashbourne sat across from her in a cream suit. You are making this personal, Vivian said on the recording. Evelyn's voice was hoarse. You made it personal when you sent Henry after my daughter. Vivian smiled. Henry forms attachments. It is his weakness. He kills women. Women die, men die, fortunes scatter. Institutions preserve what individuals waste. My daughter will find you. Vivian leaned forward. Your daughter is sentimental. That makes her easy. Evelyn looked directly toward the camera then, as if seeing through years into the room where Mara would one day watch. No, her mother said. That makes her angry. The clip ended. Mara could not move. Celia paused the screen. Rowan said nothing. Noel removed his glasses. Mara touched the frozen image of her mother's face. She was alive after the fall, Mara whispered. Celia's voice was gentle but firm. This means your mother was abducted before her death was staged. Mara nodded. Her grief rearranged itself again. There is a special cruelty in learning that a death was not a moment but a process. That someone you loved had time to be afraid. Myra left the room and locked herself in the bathroom. She bent over the sink, unable to breathe. When she returned, her face was washed, her eyes dry, and something in her expression made Rowan stand. What are you going to do? He asked. Myra looked at the paused screen. Exactly what Vivian fears. And what is that? Myra picked up her mother's letter from the table. I'm going to become sentimental in public. Myra held the press conference on the courthouse steps. Celia hated the idea, Rowan argued against the timing, and every security advisor warned that public appearances increased risk. Mara listened to all of them, thanked them, and went anyway. Vivian owned rooms with closed doors. Myra needed open air. The courthouse steps were crowded by noon. Cameras lined the sidewalk. Reporters shouted questions before she reached the microphones. Behind her stood Nadia, Lena, Elsie, and 3 family members of dead victims who had agreed to be seen. Celia stood farther back, expression carved from prosecutorial stone. Myra wore no jewelry except her wedding ring on a chain around her neck. Not as a symbol of love, as evidence. She began quietly, "My name is Myra Elise Vale Voss. 6 days before my husband planned to kill me, I found the invitation to my own funeral." The crowd stilled. She told them about the invitation, the forged medical records, the planned drowning, the women before her. She named Caroline, Beatrice, Nadia, Evelyn. She did not describe the worst details. She did not need to. Restraint made the horror larger. Then she held up her mother's letter. "My mother wrote that grief does not make women useless. She was murdered because she believed I could still be saved. Today I am asking every family who lost someone under court guardianship, private care, sudden medical decline, or suspicious charitable transfer to look again." Cameras clicked. If your mother was called confused after asking about money, look again. If your aunt signed documents she could not read, look again. If your sister was isolated in treatment after inheriting wealth, look again. If a judge, doctor, attorney, deputy, or foundation told you not to question the process because they were professionals, look again. Her voice strengthened. They counted on shame. They counted on grief. They counted on our politeness, so stop being polite. A murmur moved through the crowd. Myra removed Henry's ring from the chain and placed it on the podium. "This ring was a lock. I mistook it for a promise. I am done carrying it." She stepped back. The video of Evelyn in the blue room was not released in full, but a court-approved excerpt accompanied the press conference. Vivian's voice saying, "A signature must look like a decision." That sentence became a blade. Within 24 hours, tip lines overflowed. Families called about suspicious deaths, missing relatives, coerced donations, sealed guardianship cases, and private facilities with beautiful names. Former staff called, bookkeepers called, nurses called. A driver called to say he had transported drugged patients from Haven Crest to Ashbourne-owned properties. A florist called to say she had prepared memorial arrangements before deaths on 2 occasions. Vivian Ashbourne issued a statement. She expressed sorrow, she denied wrongdoing. She praised the courage of survivors. She promised full cooperation. She called Myra understandably traumatized. That phrase enraged Myra more than denial. Understandably traumatized meant emotional. Emotional meant unreliable. It was Henry's language wearing pearls. Then Vivian made her mistake. She sued Myra for defamation. The complaint was elegant, savage, and immediate. It claimed Myra had maliciously implied Vivian participated in criminal acts. It demanded damages, retractions, and an injunction preventing Myra from publicly discussing Vivian or the Ashbourne Trust. Rowan threw the complaint onto the table and grinned. Myra stared at him. "Why are you smiling?" "Discovery." Celia, who should not have smiled because prosecutors are supposed to dislike civil complications, looked toward the window and failed to hide it. Vivian had opened a door. Myra's civil attorney, a sharp woman named Grace Imani, filed a response that read like a controlled explosion. She countersued for intentional infliction of emotional distress, conspiracy, wrongful interference with inheritance, and abuse of legal process. More importantly, she requested documents, communications, donor lists, trust records, board minutes, and internal memos related to Henry, Wren, Havencrest, and conservatorship referrals. Vivian's attorneys objected to everything. The judge denied most objections. For the first time, the Ashbourne machine had to produce paper it did not control. That night, Myra dreamed of the Blue Room. Her mother sat at the table, bruised but smiling faintly. "Do not become hard just because they were cruel," Evelyn said. Myra woke crying. In the morning, Grace called. "You need to come in," she said. "What happened?" "We received the first production." And Grace paused. "They gave us the wrong box." The wrong box contained personal correspondence between Vivian Ashbourne and Henry Voss, spanning 6 years. Most of it was coded, but not all. One email subject line read, "MV Final Transition Strategy." Myra opened it with hands that did not shake anymore. Vivian had written, "Henry, do not improvise with the wife. Sentiment has made you sloppy. If she must die, let the death teach the others why procedure matters." Myra read the sentence once. Then she began to laugh. Not because it was funny, because the weather, it turned out, had kept receipts. Vivian Ashbourne tried to claw the box back. Her attorneys filed emergency motions, claimed privilege, claimed clerical error, claimed Myra's team had an ethical duty to stop reading immediately. Grace Imani responded with the legal equivalent of a raised eyebrow. The documents had been produced voluntarily under court order. Privilege logs were incomplete. Several communications included third parties destroying confidentiality. Others discussed ongoing or future crimes. The judge ordered a special review. By then, the damage had begun. The email about Mara's final transition strategy was enough for investigators to obtain new warrants. The Ashbourne estate, trust offices, private archives, and 2 storage facilities were searched before dawn. Vivian's statement that morning spoke of cooperation. Her face, photographed through the back window of a black car, spoke of murder contained by skin. The searches uncovered ledgers, not digital ledgers, paper ledgers. Vivian belonged to a generation that trusted handwriting for the truly damning, perhaps because handwriting felt intimate and controllable. The ledgers listed names, assets, vulnerabilities, assigned handlers, projected yields, and final outcomes. Mara found herself on page 214. Vale VOSS MARAE. Target basis. Isolated heiress, grief history, no children, public reputation manageable. Handler H. Voss. Medical S. Wren. Legal Klein. Judicial Mallory. Law enforcement Harrow. Projected recovery high. Risk maternal interference. Later subject resilience. Status delayed. Recommendation decisive closure. Decisive closure. Her murder reduced to administrative style. Evelyn Vale appeared earlier. Interference removed. Mara sat with the ledger in the evidence review room, staring until the words detached from meaning and became scratches. Rowan spoke first. You don't have to keep reading. Yes, Mara said, I do. The ledger named 43 victims. Some were alive, some were dead, some were unknown. Every name had a family, a room, a morning when they still believed the world had rules. Vivian's machine had converted them into yield. Federal charges multiplied. Conspiracy, fraud, kidnapping, civil rights violations, murder for profit referrals, money laundering, obstruction, racketeering. Henry changed his plea strategy within a week. He wanted a deal, Celia told Myra in a small conference room with no windows. He is offering testimony against Vivian. Myra looked at her. In exchange for what? Reduced exposure on some financial counts. No promise on murder-related charges. He wants to survive by selling the woman who taught him. Yes, let him. Rowan frowned. You sure? Myra almost laughed. I don't need Henry Noble, I need him useful. The first proffer session was recorded. Myra was allowed to watch from behind glass. Henry entered thinner, paler, but still searching for mirrors in other people's eyes. He looked diminished until he began speaking. Then the old charm returned, not warm now but oily with self-preservation. He described Vivian recruiting him after his family's near bankruptcy. He described marriage integration as a strategy. He described Wren's role in manufacturing incompetence, Klein's role in signatures, Mallory's role in orders, Harrow's role in scene control. And Mara, the prosecutor asked. Henry looked toward the glass. He could not see her, but he knew she was there. Mara was difficult, he said. How? She loved people after they died. It made her less practical. Behind the glass, Mara felt Rowan shift beside her. Henry continued. Vivian warned me not to underestimate that. I did anyway. Did you plan to kill your wife on October 18th? Henry closed his eyes, performing remorse like a hymn. Yes. Why? He opened them. Because I could not control her living. There it was, the whole marriage in one sentence. Mara left before the session ended. Outside, rain fell hard on the federal building steps. Rowan followed her but did not speak. She appreciated that. There are moments when comfort is another demand. After a while, she said, I wanted him to say he hated me. Why? Because then it would have been about me. Rowan shook his head. It was about him. I know. That does not make it less cruel. No, Mara said. It makes it emptier. The trial schedule was set for spring, but Vivian's legal team fought to delay. Her age became a shield. Her philanthropy became a character witness. Her doctors filed statements about stress. Her allies wrote letters describing a lifetime of service. Mara read one line from a senator. Mrs. Ashbourne has always protected the vulnerable. She circled it in red. Then she wrote beneath it, from whom? As the case grew, so did the danger. 2 witnesses recanted. One vanished for 48 hours and returned unwilling to speak. Nadia's brother's old friend was offered money to discredit her. Lena found a tracker under her car. Mara understood then that Vivian's system had not collapsed. It had recoiled. A wounded machine still had teeth. 3 nights before the grand jury hearing, Elsie disappeared. She had gone downstairs to close the bakery and never returned. Her phone lay on the counter beside a tray of cooling bread. The back door was open. On the floor, in flour, someone had drawn a single white rose. Myra stared at it while police lights painted the walls. Vivian had stopped writing notes. Now she was taking pieces. Mara did not sleep after Elsie vanished. The agents told her to stay inside. Rowan told her the same. Celia said every available unit was searching. Tomas drove through half the county screaming his aunt's name into places no official would think to look. None of it changed the empty room above the bakery or the flower rose on the floor. By morning, a video arrived. It was sent to Mara's prepaid phone from an encrypted number. Elsie sat in a wooden chair under a bare bulb. Her hands were tied, but her back was straight. There was bruising on her cheek. She looked furious, not frightened. A voice off camera said, "Tell Mrs. Voss to withdraw her civil action and decline further public statements." Elsie stared into the lens. "Mara," she said, "if you do what they ask, I will haunt you personally." The video ended. Mara laughed and cried at the same time. That was Elsie. Even kidnapped, she refused to be convenient. Celia watched the video twice. The room has exposed brick, industrial, listen. In the background, beneath the hum of the bulb, came a low periodic sound. A horn. Rowan said, "River traffic." Noel pulled up maps. Ashbourne owned 3 properties near the river. 2 had been searched. The third was an abandoned textile mill held through a preservation nonprofit. Of course it was. By dusk, federal teams surrounded the mill. Myra was not allowed near the operation, which was reasonable, necessary, and intolerable. She waited in a command van with Nadia and Tomas, listening to clipped radio traffic while every second became a room with no air. Entry team moving. Second floor clear. Basement access located. Then gunshots cracked through the radio. Tomas stood so fast he hit his head on the van ceiling. Nadia grabbed Mara's hand. More static, shouting, then, "Victim located, alive." Tomas collapsed back into the seat, sobbing. Elsie emerged from the mill 20 minutes later, wrapped in a blanket, and insulting the paramedic who tried to make her sit. Mara ran to her despite orders not to move. Elsie hugged her with surprising strength. "I told you not to bargain," Elsie said. "I didn't. Good girl." 3 men were arrested at the mill. One was a former Harrow deputy. One worked private security for Ashbourne events. The third had a burner phone containing instructions from a number linked to Vivian's personal assistant. Vivian denied knowledge. Her assistant did not. Faced with kidnapping charges, the assistant began talking before her attorney finished sitting down. She described Vivian's pressure operations, the witness intimidation, the document destruction, the relocation of Havencrest drives, the threat note, the tracker, the attempted coercion of Elsie. She also revealed the existence of a final archive hidden not in a facility, trust office, or estate, but inside the Ashbourne Museum of Civic Memory. Vivian had built a museum to virtue. She hid her crimes beneath it. The archive room was discovered behind a false wall in climate-controlled storage. Inside were patient recordings, financial maps, judicial favors, blackmail files, and sealed envelopes labeled with names of public officials. The system had protected itself by making too many powerful people afraid of exposure. Among the files was one marked Henry VOSS, Exit Options. Celia opened it in Mara's presence. It contained plans to eliminate Henry if he became a liability. Car accident, overdose, jail suicide, boating accident after acquittal. Mara read the list without pity. Henry had believed he was chosen. He had been inventory. The archive also contained Evelyn Vale's final hours. Celia warned Myra not to watch. Rowan begged her not to. Elsie, bruised and wrapped in a blanket, said simply, "Your mother already gave you what she wanted you to carry." Myra did not watch. That refusal was the first mercy she gave herself. Instead, she requested the audio transcript. She read only the final page. Evelyn's last recorded words were, "My daughter will not be your lesson. She will be your consequence." Mara folded the transcript and placed it beside her mother's letter. The next morning, Vivian Ashbourne was arrested at her estate while standing beneath a portrait of herself painted 20 years younger. Cameras captured her leaving in handcuffs, spine straight, face serene. As if arrest were merely a vulgar misunderstanding, she expected servants to resolve. A reporter shouted, "Mrs. Ashbourne, do you have any comment?" Vivian paused. For 1 second, her eyes found Mara beyond the gate. Then she said, "The ungrateful always mistake order for cruelty." Myra stepped forward before anyone could stop her. "No," she called back. "The cruel always call themselves order." The clip went viral within an hour. But Myra did not feel victorious. Elsie was alive, Nadia was free, Lena was safe, Henry was turning witness, Vivian was caged. Still, 43 names lay in a ledger, and some of them would never come home. Justice had arrived wearing handcuffs. It did not resurrect anyone. The trials were separated because the defendants had begun feeding on one another. Henry blamed Vivian. Vivian blamed Henry. Wren blamed medical uncertainty. Klein blamed client instructions. Mallory blamed forged initials. Harrow blamed orders he claimed he misunderstood. Each of them discovered, too late, that conspiracy was marriage without love. Everyone knew where the bodies were buried, and loyalty lasted only until sentencing exposure. Henry's trial came first. The courtroom filled every day before sunrise. Reporters camped outside. True crime channels dissected Myra's clothing, posture, hair, and facial expressions until strangers online argued whether she looked too calm or not calm enough. Myra ignored them as much as possible. Surviving public violence meant accepting that people would try to consume your recovery as entertainment. On the stand, she wore navy. Celia guided her through the story. The study, the black invitation, Elsie's receipt, the wall safe, her mother's letter, the tea, the cellar, Henry's confession. The defense tried to make her angry. That was their only path. If Myra became emotional, they could call her unstable. If she remained composed, they could call her cold. Women were cross-examined in cages built from contradiction. Henry's attorney approached with a sympathetic frown. "Mrs. Voss, you admit you lied to your husband during the week before October 18th. Yes. You secretly recorded him. Yes. You invited journalists and prosecutors into your home under false pretenses. I invited them to the reception Henry planned after my death." A ripple moved through the courtroom. The judge called for quiet. The attorney tightened his mouth. "You also entered Havencrest under false credentials and removed Nadia Say. I helped an imprisoned woman leave a facility now under federal indictment. You are not law enforcement." "No, so you took the law into your own hands." Myra looked at Henry. He watched her with a faint smile, waiting for the performance he needed. She turned back to the attorney. "No," she said. "For 5 years, men used the law as a weapon against me. I took my life back into my own hands. There is a difference." The jury heard it. Henry's testimony against Vivian did not save him from himself. Under cross-examination, he tried to appear remorseful. But remorse requires seeing the victim as real. Henry could describe systems, payments, and procedures. When asked what Myra suffered, he spoke of outcomes, misjudgments, and pressure. Celia asked him one final question. "Mr. Voss, when did you stop loving your wife?" Henry looked confused. "I don't understand." "No further questions," Celia said. That was the moment Myra knew the jury had seen him. The verdict came after 11 hours. Guilty on conspiracy to commit murder. Guilty on attempted murder. Guilty on fraud. Guilty on kidnapping-related charges. Guilty on money laundering. Guilty on obstruction. Henry stood motionless as each count landed. His mother, seated behind him, began to weep quietly into a handkerchief. Myra felt pity for her, which irritated her. Pity arrived without permission. At sentencing, Henry spoke. He turned toward Myra. "I know you believe I destroyed your life." Myra stared at him. He continued, "But I also gave you purpose. Without me, you would still be lost in grief." Gasps rose. The judge silenced the room. Myra almost laughed. Even now, he wanted credit for the shape of the woman who survived him. When given a chance to speak, she stood. "You did not give me purpose," she said. "You gave me evidence. My purpose was mine before you found me. My mother knew it. My father knew it. Elsie knew it. You mistook my silence for emptiness because emptiness was all you had to offer." Henry looked away first. He was sentenced to life without parole for the murder conspiracy and related charges, with additional consecutive sentences that made release impossible. As officers led him away, he turned once more. "Myra," he said. For years, her name in his mouth had been command, correction, possession. Now it was only sound. She did not answer. Vivian's trial began 6 weeks later. It was colder, cleaner, more dangerous. Vivian did not glare. She did not smile at the wrong moments. She entered court in soft, gray suits and pearls, every inch the matriarch wrongfully accused by lesser people. Her attorneys were brilliant. Her allies were quieter now, but still present in the gallery like old ghosts wearing expensive coats. The prosecution presented ledgers, videos, financial trails, witness testimony, assistant testimony, Henry's testimony, and the archive. Vivian's defense argued she was a philanthropist whose generosity had been exploited by corrupt men beneath her. Then Myra took the stand again. Vivian watched without blinking. Celia asked, "Mrs. Voss, what did Vivian Ashbourne say to you at the luncheon?" Most of it was swallowed by fountain noise. "Tell us what you remember." Myra looked at the jury. She said history is written by institutions, not widows with bruises. Vivian's expression did not change. Celia nodded. And what do you believe she meant? The defense objected, sustained. Myra waited. Celia rephrased. How did those words make you feel? Myra looked at Vivian, like she had forgotten widows can learn to write. Vivian did not break under evidence. She eroded. That was the difference between her and Henry. Henry, once cornered, performed, pleaded, explained, betrayed. Vivian endured. She sat through testimony from families whose mothers, sisters, aunts, husbands, and daughters had been stripped of assets and autonomy. She listened to Nadia describe the Blue Room. She listened to Elsie describe the kidnapping. She listened to Henry describe her instructions. She listened to her assistant authenticate messages. Through it all, she remained composed. Her stillness became its own confession. On the 12th day, prosecutors played the video of Evelyn Vale in the Blue Room. Myra had chosen not to watch the full recording before. In court, she could not avoid it entirely. She kept her eyes on the jury instead of the screen, listening to her mother's voice fill the room. You made it personal when you sent Henry after my daughter. Several jurors looked at Myra. She did not move. Vivian's attorney objected repeatedly. The judge allowed the key portions. The courtroom heard Vivian say, "A signature must look like a decision." It heard her describe Henry as prone to attachment. It heard Evelyn say Myra would find her. Then came Evelyn's final line. "My daughter will not be your lesson. She will be your consequence." The recording stopped. No one breathed. Vivian looked at Myra then, not with hatred. Hatred would have been human. She looked at her as one might look at a storm that had damaged a beloved garden wall. In closing arguments, Vivian's lead attorney spoke beautifully. He spoke of a woman born into responsibility, a life of service, decades of giving, the dangers of turning philanthropy into suspicion, the unreliability of criminals bargaining for leniency, the tragedy of ambitious prosecutors needing a symbol. Celia Brand stood afterward with no theatrics. She placed the ledger on the evidence table. "Symbols do not keep ledgers," she said. Then she read names. All 43, not quickly, not dramatically, carefully. Each name given the dignity Vivian's system had tried to convert into numbers. Caroline Ames, Beatrice Lowell, Nadia Say, Evelyn Vale, Mara Voss, Lena Ortiz interrupted before completion. Name after name after name. By the time Celia finished, several people in the gallery were crying. "Vivian Ashbourne called this order," Celia said. "But order that requires kidnapping, fraud, forced medication, forged signatures, staged deaths, and murdered mothers is not civilization. It is predation with a board of directors." The jury deliberated for 3 days. During that time, Mara stayed away from cameras. She went to the cemetery where her parents were buried. The grass had been trimmed. Someone had left white flowers at Evelyn's grave. Mara removed them. She replaced them with wildflowers bought from a roadside stand because her mother had hated formal arrangements. "I found you," Mara whispered. Wind moved through the trees. "I'm sorry it took so long." A voice behind her said, "She knew you would." Mara turned. Elsie stood near the path holding a paper bag from the bakery. "You brought bread to a cemetery?" Mara asked. "Your mother liked raisin rolls." Mara laughed through tears. They sat between the graves and ate raisin rolls in silence. When the verdict came, the courthouse was surrounded. Mara stood in the front row with Nadia on one side and Lena on the other. Elsie sat behind them, hands folded like a churchwoman waiting for a hymn to end. Vivian stood as the jury entered. Guilty on racketeering conspiracy. Guilty on kidnapping conspiracy. Guilty on fraud. Guilty on money laundering. Guilty on obstruction. Guilty on murder-related conspiracy, counts connected to multiple deaths. The final count related to Evelyn Vale. Guilty. Mara closed her eyes. Not relief, not joy, something quieter. A door opening in a house she no longer lived in. Vivian did not react. She only turned slightly toward Mara. For a heartbeat, the old woman's composure thinned, and Mara saw what lived beneath. Not guilt, not fear, but disbelief. Vivian could not understand how someone she had marked as sentimental had become the instrument of her ruin. At sentencing, weeks later, Vivian spoke only one sentence. "I preserved what weaker people would have wasted." The judge, an elderly woman appointed from outside the district after Mallory's disgrace, looked at her for a long time. "No," the judge said. "You consumed what trusting people should have been allowed to keep." Vivian received a sentence that guaranteed she would die in federal prison. As she was led away, cameras captured no breakdown, no final curse, no remorse. That disappointed the public. They wanted monsters to reveal themselves with fangs. Myra knew better. The worst monsters often left politely. That evening, she returned to Voss' house for the last time. The government had finished processing it. The estate would be sold, its proceeds directed into a victim's restitution fund. Mara walked through the empty rooms without fear. The study smelled of dust. The music room held only the piano. The wine cellar door stood open, lights on, stripped of shadows. On the foyer floor, faint marks remained where the memorial table had stood. Mara paused, then she carried her father's old piano bench outside to the garden and sat beneath the darkening sky. She had survived the house. Now she had to decide who lived after survival. 1 year after the funeral that never happened, Mara received a package from the state archives. Inside was her father's original accident file. Not a copy, the original. Water-damaged, annotated, sealed, buried, recovered from Vivian's museum archive, and finally released. Mara sat at Elsie's bakery table with the file unopened for nearly an hour. Some truths are chased for so long that when they arrive, they look like another injury. Rowan arrived with coffee. They were friends now, though the word felt too simple for someone who had witnessed both her evidence and her silences. He did not ask to stay. He simply placed the cup beside her and waited. Mara opened the file. The mechanic's statement was there. Cut break lines, tool marks, no accidental failure. The original toxicology showed her father had not been drunk, drugged, or sleepy. A witness had reported seeing a dark sedan near the crash site. Deputy Harrow buried it. Judge Mallory sealed it. Klein redirected probate. Henry entered Mara's life later wearing condolences built from surveillance. At the back was a handwritten note from her father to Evelyn, found in his desk but never delivered. If I am wrong, forgive me for frightening you. If I am right, protect Mara from charming men with empty eyes. Mara pressed the note flat. Rowan looked away, giving her privacy inside the public act of reading. He saw Henry, she said. Yes, I didn't. You were grieving. I was lonely. Loneliness is not a crime. No, Mara said, but predators treat it like an unlocked door. The year had changed her life in visible and invisible ways. Voss House was gone, purchased by a developer who planned to turn it into a conference retreat. The Voss Foundation had been dissolved. The Ashbourne Trust was under receivership. Haven Crest had become evidence, then headline, then condemned property. Mallory, Wren, Klein, and Harrow had all been convicted or pleaded guilty. Families of victims were pursuing civil claims. Some would win money. None would get back time. Mara had moved into a modest brick house 2 blocks from Elsie's bakery. It had uneven floors, unreliable plumbing, and no rooms she was forbidden to enter. She loved it fiercely. The piano came with her. On difficult nights, she played badly and loudly until the ghosts either settled or complained. Nadia lived nearby in a supervised apartment she chose herself. Choice mattered now in ways Mara had never understood before. Nadia chose blue curtains because she wanted to reclaim the color. Lena funded legal aid for guardianship victims and sent Mara terrible memes at midnight. Tomas became insufferable after local papers called him a hero with a fire axe. Elsie framed the article and denied doing so. Mara did not return to who she had been. That woman had died in pieces long before Henry scheduled the funeral. The question was not how to revive her. The question was how to honor her without becoming a monument to harm. So Mara founded the Veil Witness Project. It began with one office above the bakery and a phone line answered by volunteers. Families called when something felt wrong. Sudden conservatorships, suspicious facility placements, strange donations, lawyers who discouraged questions, doctors who spoke only to wealthy spouses. The project connected them with attorneys, journalists, forensic accountants, and advocates. It taught people how to request records, preserve evidence, document medication changes, and challenge sealed proceedings. The first month, they received 14 calls. By the 6th, they received hundreds. Mara hated that the need was so large. She loved that fewer people would stand alone in hallways holding impossible paper. On October 18th, she held a gathering. Not a memorial, not a gala, never a gala, a gathering. They met in the bakery courtyard under strings of warm lights. Families brought photographs. Survivors brought food. Elsie made too much bread. Rowan gave a speech so short everyone applauded, mostly from surprise. Celia attended without a badge. Noel brought charts because he did not know how not to. Mara placed a small table at the center. On it were 43 cards, each bearing a name from Vivian's ledger. Beside them lay one blank card for those not yet found. When it was her turn to speak, Mara stood beneath the lights. 1 year ago today, she said, a room had been prepared for my grief before my body was gone. Men had written my ending. A woman with museums had approved the lesson. They believed paperwork could make murder respectable. The courtyard quieted. They were wrong not because I was fearless. I was terrified. Not because the system saved me. It nearly killed me. Not because justice is inevitable. It is not. They were wrong because my mother left a letter, an old housekeeper kept a receipt, a journalist answered the phone, witnesses chose risk over silence, and the dead were not as quiet as the guilty hope. Elsie wiped her eyes and pretended she had flour on her face. Myra lifted the blank card. "For everyone still hidden," she said, "we are looking." Afterward, she walked home alone. She was allowed to now. The night was cool. The streets were ordinary. A dog barked. Someone laughed from an open window. No car slowed beside her. No husband waited to ask where she had been. At home, Myra placed her father's note and her mother's letter in a wooden box on the piano. Then she removed Henry's funeral invitation, the original black card, from the evidence sleeve where she had kept it. She read her own name one last time, in loving memory of Myra Elise Voss. She took a pen and crossed out Voss. Above it, she wrote Vale. Then beneath the printed words, she added, "Beloved daughter, unfinished woman not taken." She closed the box. Outside, the wind moved gently through the trees, and for once it did not sound like warning. Myra learned that endings are often administrative. A judge signs, a clerk stamps, a bank transfers funds, a house changes ownership, a foundation dissolves into restitution schedules, a prison intake officer photographs the powerful beneath fluorescent light. Papers move and the world calls it closure. But closure, Myra discovered, was a word people used when they wanted grief to stop making noise. Hers did not stop, it changed volume. Some mornings she woke calm. Other mornings she smelled Henry's drugged tea and ordinary chamomile. She could not sit with her back to a door. She kept copies of important documents in 3 places. She disliked white lilies, charity luncheons, men who called women fragile, and doctors who spoke to companions instead of patients. She also laughed more than expected. That surprised her most. She laughed when Elsie threatened to fire a volunteer for alphabetizing survivor files, with the imagination of a tax auditor. She laughed when Nadia painted her kitchen a violent shade of blue and declared it therapeutic revenge. She laughed when Tomas tried to fix her sink, flooded the pantry, and bowed like a tragic hero before Elsie hit him with a towel. Survival did not make life solemn forever. Sometimes it made soup taste better. 2 years after Vivian's conviction, Myra received permission to visit the federal prison where Henry was held. She had not requested it. Henry had. He had sent letters for months, each one returned unopened. Finally, through his attorney, he claimed he possessed information about a missing victim not found in Vivian's ledger. Celia warned Myra it was likely manipulation. "I know," Myra said. "Then why go?" "Because manipulation can still contain facts." The visitation room was colder than necessary. Henry entered in prison khaki, older now, though not enough. His beauty had thinned. Without tailored suits and curated lighting, he looked like a man who had spent his life outsourcing substance to other people's fear. He sat across from her behind glass. "Myra," he said through the phone. "Henry, you look well. You look contained." His mouth tightened, still cruel when you want to be. "No, just accurate." For a moment, the old rhythm tempted the room, his disapproval searching for a wound, her body remembering how to defend against it. Then the rhythm broke. She was not his wife anymore, not in law, not in fear, not in reflex. "You said there was another victim," she said. Henry leaned back. "I hoped we could talk first." "We are talking. I mean honestly." Myra almost smiled. "You first." His eyes moved over her face. "Do you ever miss anything about us?" "No." The answer landed harder than anger would have. "Not even the beginning. The beginning was bait. I cared for you. You studied me. I chose you. You targeted me." His hand tightened around the phone. "There is a difference," Myra said, "between being loved and being selected." Henry looked away. When he finally spoke, his voice had lost its polish. Vivian kept a name off the ledger. A boy, not a woman, Daniel Rusk. Inherited oil money from an uncle, sent to a wilderness treatment program after a breakdown. Assets vanished through Ashbourne channels. "Why tell me now?" "Because I dream about the seller." "Good." He flinched. Myra wrote the name down. "Is he alive?" "I don't know." "Where?" Henry gave her the name of a facility in Montana that had closed years earlier, then reopened under another company. She wrote everything, asked precise questions, gave him no emotion to feed on. At the end, Henry pressed his hand to the glass. "I made you what you are," he said. There it was again. The final vanity, the need to be author of even his own destruction. Myra stood. "No," she said, "you revealed what you are. I made myself after." She hung up the phone. Daniel Rusk was found 6 months later in a private care home under a false surname. Alive. He had lost years, money, family, and nearly language. but he was alive. His sister, who had been told he wanted no contact, flew across the country and held him in a hospital room while cameras waited outside and were not allowed in. The Veil Witness Project grew after Daniel, not because Mara wanted growth, but because hidden things kept surfacing. The project became a network, then a fund, then a national pressure campaign. Laws changed slowly, imperfectly, fought by the same kinds of people who loved vulnerable populations in speeches and profit margins in private. Mara testified before a Senate committee. She hated the room immediately. Too much polished wood. Too many men leaning back as if history were a chair designed for them. She placed the black funeral invitation on the microphone stand before speaking. "This was printed before I died," she said. That is how confident they were. No one leaned back after that. Years later, people would ask when she knew she was free. They expected her to say the day Henry was convicted, or Vivian, or the day Voss House was sold, or the day she crossed out her married name on the funeral card. But freedom arrived smaller. It came on a rainy Tuesday, when Mara lost the spare key to her own garden shed. She searched the kitchen drawer, the coat pockets, the windowsill, muttering irritably. The house smelled of coffee. Nadia was due for lunch. Elsie had left bread on the porch. The piano waited in the next room, with sheet music crooked on the stand. Mara walked to her tiny study, opened every drawer and found nothing but pens, stamps, and old receipts. Then she laughed, not because the key was found, it was still missing, because the study door was open, because no drawer was locked, because there was no portrait hiding a safe, no husband monitoring her footsteps, no doctor waiting to rename her suspicion, no judge preparing to erase her voice. Only a missing key, only reigned, only an unfinished woman in a house with no forbidden rooms. Mara made tea and did not fear it. That was freedom. That evening she sat at the piano and played the song her mother loved. Badly, as always, the notes wandered, the rhythm faltered. Outside, rain tapped the windows with soft persistence. On the piano sat the wooden box containing her parents' letters and the funeral invitation. She did not open it often anymore. Some evidence becomes sacred not because it proves what happened, but because it reminds the living that proof was necessary and should not have been. Mara played until the room grew dark. Then she stopped, rested her hands on the keys, and spoke into the quiet. "I'm still here." No ghost answered. No villain waited. No applause came. Only the house, ordinary and unlocked, holding her voice without taking it. And that at last was enough.
You fed me lies with poison lips. I bled from every sinking ship. But now I rise with sharpened grace. You'll see the venom in my face. You broke my wings, I grew my claws. Now hear the wrath behind my cause. I've got a venom heart, tearing your world apart. You built your throne on hollow truth. Now feel the fire of my youth. No more tears, no more regret. I'm the storm you won't forget. You played the game, you pulled the strings, but I'm the chaos fate now brings. I won't be silent, won't be tamed. You'll scream before you say my